September 15, 1944. Peleliu Island, Palau Archipelago. The morning heat rises off the coral like steam from a furnace. Waves slap against steel hulls as amphibious tractors churn forward, their engines grinding, clanking, rattling under the weight of men packed shoulder to shoulder. Inside one of them, Private First Class Robert Leckie of the 1st Marine Division wipes sweat from his eyes, his rifle resting across his knees. The air smells of diesel fuel, salt water, and fear. Ahead, the island looks quiet. Too quiet. For the Japanese defenders watching from hidden positions in the Umurbrogol ridges, this is familiar. Another American landing, another beach assault that they believe will follow the pattern they have studied carefully since 1941. Wake Island, the Philippines, even earlier Pacific engagements. The Americans land hard, suffer losses, then pull back when the cost becomes too high. This time the Japanese are certain will be no different. Lieutenant General Sadai Inoue's troops have spent months preparing Peleliu. Over 10,000 Japanese soldiers are dug deep into limestone caves, concrete bunkers, and spider holes carved into the rock. They have abandoned the old doctrine of suicidal beach charges. Instead, they plan to let the Americans land, bleed them slowly, grind them down, and break their will. From their vantage points, Japanese soldiers watch the horizon darken as the U.S. Navy opens fire. Battleships Pennsylvania and Tennessee unleash thunderous salvos. The ground shakes. Palm trees disintegrate. The air screams. Then the bombardment lifts. The Japanese do not rush forward. They wait. At 8:32 a.m., the first wave of U.S. Marines hits the beach. The sand is blindingly white, the sun directly overhead. Almost immediately, machine gun fire erupts from hidden positions. Mortars crash down among the landing craft. Men fall. Vehicles burn. The beach becomes a killing ground in minutes. Yet something feels wrong. The Marines do not hesitate. Wave after wave pushes forward through fire that should, by every calculation, force a retreat. Flamethrower teams crawl toward pillboxes. Engineers drag Bangalore torpedoes through open sand. Wounded men are pulled aside, not evacuated en masse. By midday, casualties are staggering. On the northern beaches, the 1st Marines are nearly shattered. Heatstroke compounds the carnage. Temperatures climb above 115 degrees. Canteens run dry. Men collapse where they stand. Still, they do not retreat. Japanese observers report the same unsettling detail over and over. The Americans keep coming back. Units that should be combat ineffective are reorganizing and advancing again. Marines fight for yards of ground, then inches, then feet, but they never abandon the line. For Japanese soldiers trained to expect hesitation, this is deeply disturbing. By nightfall, Peleliu is burning. The sky glows orange as ammunition dumps explode. Tracers streak through the darkness. In the caves, Japanese defenders listen to unfamiliar sounds, bulldozers grinding forward even under fire, sealing cave entrances, cutting off escape. This is not a raid. This is not a probe. This is an occupation, and the Americans are willing to die for it. As days turn into weeks, the Japanese defensive plan begins to unravel, not tactically but psychologically. Their strategy assumes that American morale has a breaking point, that casualties will force withdrawal, that commanders will call it off, but the Marines dig in. They sleep in shallow foxholes scraped into coral with bayonets. They fight for ridges that have no names, only numbers. They take losses that would have ended earlier campaigns and keep attacking. Japanese officers write in their journals that the enemy shows no sign of yielding. Some note with growing unease that even after failed assaults, American units reorganize with methodical calm. Supplies continue to arrive. Replacements continue to land. By October, Peleliu has become something else entirely. Not a battle of maneuver, but a war of endurance. And for the first time in the Pacific, Japanese soldiers begin to understand a terrible truth. The Americans are no longer fighting to see if they can win. They are fighting because retreat is no longer an option. October 3rd, 1944. Peleliu Island. Dawn breaks without relief. The sun rises the same way it has for weeks, brutal, merciless, exposing everything it touches. On Hill 100, a Japanese corporal presses his cheek against cool limestone, peering through a firing slit barely wide enough for his rifle barrel. Below him, Marines are moving again, not charging, advancing. This is what unsettles him most. The Americans do not surge forward in reckless waves anymore. They move deliberately now. Fire teams leapfrog. One group pins a position while another maneuvers. Mortars drop with precise timing. Flamethrowers crawl forward under covering fire, spitting liquid fire into cave mouths that once felt impregnable. The corporal has survived Saipan. He has seen Americans hesitate there, pause, pull back, regroup offshore. That memory is what carried him through the first days of Peleliu. But now, watching the Marines climb the ridgeline again, he feels something cold settle in his stomach. They are not leaving. Inside a shallow command post carved into rock, a Japanese lieutenant studies a map already worn thin at the folds. His unit has been reduced to half strength. Ammunition is low. Water is rationed by mouthfuls. Orders from higher command are brief, almost ritualistic. Hold. Inflict casualties. Die where you stand. But the problem is no longer tactical. It is expectation. For years, Japanese doctrine has emphasized the idea that Western armies lack the will to sustain prolonged losses. The early war seemed to prove it. The Philippines fell. Allied forces withdrew from Malaya, from Singapore, from the Dutch East Indies. Retreat had become predictable. Now at Peleliu the pattern is broken. American commanders do not rotate units off the island, despite casualty rates that would horrify civilians back home. The 1st Marine Division has suffered over 6,500 casualties, nearly one-third of its strength. And yet, replacements keep coming, artillery keeps firing, supplies keep landing on beaches that are still under intermittent fire. The Japanese defenders begin to notice something else. The wounded Marines do not collapse the line. When a platoon is shattered, another fills the gap. When a company is reduced to dozens, it is reinforced overnight. Bulldozers push forward even under sniper fire, carving supply routes through rubble and coral. The island itself is being reshaped. In the Umabrogel ridges, the fighting becomes intimate, savage, and endless. Grenades bounce off rock walls. Cave complexes connect in ways no map fully captures. Japanese soldiers emerge at night to attack, then vanish back into the earth. But the Marines adapt again. They seal caves instead of assaulting them head-on. They pour fuel, explosives, and earth into entrances. The ground becomes a tomb. For the defenders inside, the realization arrives slowly, sometimes while listening to the scrape of bulldozer blades just beyond the rock. This is not an enemy trying to win quickly. This is an enemy willing to stay forever. By November, Peleliu is officially declared secured, though fighting continues in the ridges for weeks more. Of the Japanese garrison, fewer than 300 will survive. The rest are dead, but the lesson does not die with them. It travels. February 19th, 1945, Iwo Jima. The sand here is black volcanic ash, soft and treacherous. When the first wave of Marines lands, they sink ankle-deep with every step. Mount Suribachi looms ahead, silent and watchful. Again, the beaches are eerily quiet. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi has studied Peleliu closely. He has refined its lessons. No banzai charges. No wasted lives at the water's edge. The Americans will be allowed to land, to cluster, to believe they are unopposed. Then the island will erupt. When it does, The Marines are cut down in shocking numbers. Artillery hidden deep within the island fires with deadly accuracy. Machine guns rake the beaches. Casualties mount so fast that medics can barely move. Kuribayashi expects something crucial to happen next. A pause, a withdrawal. It never comes. Instead, more Marines land. More tanks grind ash into dust. More engineers crawl forward under fire. Naval gunfire pounds Suribachi relentlessly. Aircraft scream overhead, dropping bombs so close you can feel the concussion through your chest. From underground tunnels, Japanese soldiers listen as explosions shake the mountain day and night. They expect exhaustion, they expect American morale to crack. But the Americans dig in. They establish airfields under fire. They fight for yards of ground and hold them. Even when entire units are decimated, the line bends, but does not break. Kuribayashi begins to understand what Peleliu had already revealed. There will be no evacuation. There will be no retreat. The Americans are not measuring victory by casualties anymore. They are measuring it by ground held, and they are willing to pay any price to keep it. As the days drag on and the island bleeds, a grim certainty spreads through the tunnels and bunkers. This war, against this enemy, will not end with a withdrawal. It will end only when one side is gone. March 1st, 1945, Iwo Jima. The wind carries ash across the battlefield like drifting snow. It coats rifles, clogs lungs, and turns the dead into dark, indistinct shapes against the ground. Somewhere beneath Mount Suribachi, a Japanese sergeant listens to the rumble of American tanks passing overhead. He has been underground for days, moving through tunnels by memory alone, counting time by the vibrations of artillery rather than the sun. He had expected the Americans to pause by now. Instead, they are closer than ever. Kuribayashi's defenses were designed to bleed the enemy, not stop them outright. Every ridge, every bunker, every interlocking field of fire was meant to cost the Americans dearly, and it has. More than 20,000 Marines will become casualties on this island. Entire companies will be erased in minutes. But the Japanese soldiers are paying attention to something far more unsettling than numbers. Even after catastrophic losses, American units return to the same objectives. They advance into fire that has already killed their friends. They move forward knowing exactly what waits for them, and go anyway. A Marine corporal from the 5th Marine Division crawls up a slope littered with bodies. His radio operator was killed minutes ago. His squad is down to 4 men. He does not retreat. He cannot. Orders are simple. Take the ground, hold it, pass it on. This behavior defies everything Japanese officers have been taught about Western warfare. On Saipan and earlier islands, retreat had seemed inevitable once losses mounted. Here, retreat does not exist. American commanders rotate battalions, but never abandon objectives. Airfields are built under fire. Supply routes are carved forward no matter the cost. Kuribayashi understands the implication before most of his men do. This enemy is not trying to avoid casualties. They are trying to end the war. By mid-March, Mount Suribachi has fallen, but the fighting only intensifies in the northern part of the island. The terrain becomes a maze of ridges and ravines, with names like Hill 382 and Turkey Knob, places that will be remembered only by the men who died there. Japanese soldiers continue to emerge at night, attacking with grenades and bayonets, then melting back into the earth. But even these attacks feel different now. They are acts of defiance, not strategy. The Americans respond methodically. They flood tunnels. They collapse entrances. Flamethrowers roar like living creatures, pouring fire into darkness. Bulldozers push earth over bunker openings, burying defenders alive. For those inside, the realization comes not during combat, but in the silence afterward. When no counterattack arrives, no relief appears, no withdrawal order is ever given. Kuribayashi forbids banzai charges precisely because he knows they will not change the outcome. His goal is to make the Americans pay as much as possible before the end, but even he cannot escape the truth. The Americans are advancing because they believe every step brings them closer to Japan itself. This understanding spreads among the defenders. Captured diaries speak of disbelief. They do not retreat even when it would be wise. Others note that American soldiers fight on despite wounds that would have ended earlier battles. Medics move forward under fire. Engineers work in open view of enemy guns. The refusal to retreat becomes a weapon in itself. It breaks the psychological balance of the battlefield. Japanese soldiers had prepared for an enemy who would hesitate, who would calculate losses and reconsider. Instead, they face an enemy who calculates losses and advances anyway. On March 25, 1945, the final organized Japanese resistance on Iwo Jima collapses. Kuribayashi is dead, either killed in combat or by his own hand. Of the more than 21,000 Japanese defenders, fewer than 300 survive. The island is silent at last, but the lesson of Iwo Jima does not end there. It travels to Okinawa, it reaches the Imperial General Staff, and it changes the way Japan sees the war's final chapter. Because if the Americans will not retreat from islands like Peleliu and Iwo Jima, places with no civilians, no cities, no symbolic value beyond airfields, what will they do when they reach the home islands themselves? That question lingers, unanswered, as the war moves toward its most devastating conclusion. April 1, 1945, Okinawa. The sea is calm, almost deceptively so. As landing craft approach the Hagushi beaches, American soldiers brace for the worst. Another Iwo Jima, another Peleliu. Rifles are gripped tight. Medics check bandages one last time. Officers shout over engines and surf, and then nothing. The beaches are nearly undefended. For Japanese observers watching from distant hills, this is intentional. General Mitsuru Ushijima has learned from every island that came before. The Americans will land where expected. They will advance inland. Then the killing will begin. But even as the first hours pass with minimal resistance, a quiet understanding has already taken hold among Japanese commanders. The Americans will not leave. That assumption shapes everything that follows. Rather than contest the beaches, Ushijima withdraws his forces into a vast defensive network in the island's south. Ridges honeycombed with tunnels, artillery positions, hidden deep in rock, overlapping fields of fire designed for a long, grinding fight. It is meant to become another Peleliu, another Iwo Jima, another place where the Americans are expected to bleed until their resolve collapses. Instead, something even worse happens. The Americans settle in. They build airfields within days. Supply dumps grow into cities of tents and vehicles. Artillery positions multiply. Roads appear where there were none. The island becomes a permanent base almost overnight. When fighting finally erupts in full force along the Shuri line, it is savage beyond description. Rain turns the ground to mud. Corpses sink into the earth. Shellfire never stops. Men live in foxholes flooded with water and blood. Casualties climb into the tens of thousands. And still there is no retreat. Entire Marine and Army divisions are shattered and reconstituted on the spot. Units are rotated, but the front line never collapses. When an attack fails, another follows. When a ridge is taken, it is held no matter the counterattack. Japanese soldiers, some of them veterans of earlier campaigns, recognize the pattern now with horrifying clarity. This is not hesitation. This is inevitability. Captured documents and survivor accounts describe growing despair. They do not know when to stop, one soldier writes. Others note that American artillery seems limitless, resupplied even during typhoons and constant rain. The refusal to retreat has become institutional. It is no longer about heroism or desperation. It is doctrine. By June 1945, Okinawa is lost. Over 100,000 Japanese soldiers are dead. Tens of thousands of civilians have perished. American casualties exceed 49,000. And yet, from the perspective of Japanese High Command, the most frightening realization is not the scale of destruction. It is what it implies. If this is how the Americans fight for islands hundreds of miles from home, places unknown to most of their population, what will they do for Tokyo? What will they do for Osaka, for Hiroshima? The idea of an American withdrawal from the war vanishes completely. The refusal to retreat on Peleliu and Iwo Jima was not an exception. It was a signal. The United States has committed to total victory. In underground bunkers and bombed-out headquarters across Japan, planners begin to speak openly of the unthinkable. Mass civilian mobilization, last-ditch defenses, catastrophic losses. Because the enemy advancing across the Pacific has shown, again and again, that once they land, they do not leave. And the final confrontation, whatever form it takes, will not end with negotiation or withdrawal, only with surrender or annihilation. The meaning of retreat has disappeared from the war, and the world is about to change forever.